Hearing this, Hua Cheng turned his head, and his eyes fell on Shi Qingshuan and Ming Yi, who were strangling each other behind them. He signaled. Him? He asked. Xue Lian nodded. How do you want to test? Hua Cheng asked. Many years ago, I went up against 2 venerables of empty words, and even had one cling on to me for over half a year, Xue Lian replied. During that period, I tried to trap their words and discovered one of their unique traits. They themselves didn't realize that they had such a trait, so with just a little push, they'll be easily identified. Xue Lian then passed on the secret. Once Hua Cheng heard, he said, That's easy. Let's do it this way. The 2 finished their discussion, and coincidentally, they had arrived back at that broken temple of wind and water. It was slightly chilly in the autumn air, and the skies were dim. Shi Qingshuan searched all over for the head of his brother's divine statue and glued it back on. He righted the 2 statues and placed them anew in their proper place on the altar. Xue Lian started a small fire inside the temple using rotten logs he picked up from around them, and the 4 sat around this fire. Shi Qingshuan had his ears plugged and petulantly drank a few swigs, but finally couldn't sit still anymore. We can't possibly just sit around to wait for that thing. Is there anything we can do for entertainment? He asked. He brought it up first, and it was just as Xue Lian had wanted. Ming Yi poked at the fire and said, You can still think of entertainment at a time like this? Shi Qingshuan spat. It's necessary. That thing wants me scared. This ancestor ain't scared. This Windmaster will play as happily as he will, happier than before. It'll be like New Year's. I hope it dies from anger. In the communication array, Xue Lian suggested, How about we roll some dice? Shi Qingshuan pulled a long face. Dice again? He asked. Betting over big and small rolls again? Your Highness, are you perhaps addicted? What? No, Xue Lian said. Never mind, Shi Qingshuan said. There's nothing else around anyway. Dice it is. But there's 4 of us here. Won't things get a little confusing? It won't. Here, Xue Lian said. He opened his palm and revealed 2 crafty little dice. Xue Lian explained. The 4 of us can form 2 teams. Sanlang and I will be 1 team. My lords can be another. And we'll compete to see who has the better luck. 2 dice. Each team gets 1 turn. Each person rolls once, and then we add up the rolls of that turn. If the roll is big, that team wins, and they can ask any question that the losing team must answer, or they can have them do something instead. I have a question, Shi Qingshuan said. Please ask, Xue Lian replied. Shi Qingshuan tapped his foot and said, Why are the 2 of you so naturally a team? Did you take our feelings into consideration when you divided the teams? Xue Lian cleared his throat softly. Well, if you want to switch up the teams, that's also fine. It makes no difference, he said. Shi Qingshuan stuffed his whisk into the back collar of his outer robe and said, Whatever, I don't have any complaints about it, but Crimson Rain Sword Flower has such good luck. Wouldn't we be at a disadvantage? Xue Lian smiled at him cheerfully. That's not entirely true, he said. Our team's Sanlang might be extremely lucky, but my luck is extremely bad. With the 2 combined, 1 good, 1 bad, don't we cancel each other out? Shi Qingshuan gave it some thought, and it did make sense, so he smacked his thigh and shouted, Good, then let's have at it. Then he elbowed Ming Yi. Ming Sheng, he said, did you hear the rules? Don't drag me down, all right? Ming Yi gave him a look, and within the spiritual communication array came his cold voice. Forgive me, but I'm not playing. Shi Qingshuan hastily dragged him back. It's okay if you drag me down too. Never mind. Come, come, come. Just play. Otherwise, it's too sad for me to be on a team all by myself. Thus, the four swore to a simple oath of following the rules and started playing. In the first round, Shi Qingshuan rolled out a 5. Ming Yi rolled out a 4. Hua Cheng rolled out a 6. And Xie Lian rolled out a 1. Shi Qingshuan was overjoyed. He laughed and said, "Your Highness, your luck is really bad, so bad." Xie Lian rubbed his forehead and said gently, "Although what Lord Windmaster said is the truth, can you not say it with such glee?" Shi Qingshuan cleared his throat and said, "Fine. Then what? We won. This Windmaster will ask the two of you to do something. Then, Your Highness, Crimson Rain, Swordflower, I order you to immediately strip each other's clothing." "Lord Windmaster?" Xie Lian asked, alarmed. Ming Yi turned around, looking disgusted and covering his face, as if he didn't want to see such a repulsive sight. Shi Qingshuan cheered. "Come, come, come," he said. "Don't be a sore loser. An esteemed heavenly official and an esteemed ghost king. You won't bail, right? I'm sitting in place now. Please start your show." Xie Lian looked to Hua Cheng, and Hua Cheng flipped open his arms, mouthing the words, "Gogo, it's not my fault." Feeling helpless, Xie Lian could only ask, "How much do we strip?" Shi Qingshuan was only playing around and would of course not make them look bad. He laughed, his legs shaking. "Just 1 layer is fine. Keep a few on for later." He giggled. He actually wanted to continue. Xie Lian hesitated and secretly passed his voice. "Sanlang," he said. Hua Cheng's face showed no ripple of reaction, but the voice next to Xie Lian's ear was comforting him earnestly. "Don't worry," he said. "Didn't we agree to let them win a few rounds? They'll lose eventually." This was indeed something that they had agreed upon. Only Xie Lian had not expected that Shi Qingshuan would play like this, and felt like he was slapping his own face. He reluctantly shuffled over to untie Hua Cheng's waistband. He painstakingly helped Hua Cheng out of his black outer robe, revealing the snow-white inner tunic underneath. Hua Cheng also helped Xie Lian out of his outer robe, looking at ease. His hands were slow and gentle, and he didn't touch any part of Xie Lian's body. The two of them really only removed their outer robes, nothing extraordinary and nothing unseemly, but Xie Lian still felt extremely weirded out. Assuming a proper sitting position, he stammered, again. In the second round, Shi Qingshuan rolled out a 3, Ming Yi a 6, Hua Cheng rolled out a 6 once again, and Xie Lian still rolled a 1. Shi Qingshuan slammed his fist on the ground repeatedly, laughing out loud, and Xie Lian looked to Hua Cheng again, the two of them still connected through the private communication array. "Sanlang," he said. "This is different from what they agreed upon." Hua Cheng apologized profusely. Sorry, I forgot just now. Don't be mad, Gogo. This time, it's my fault." Shi Qingshuan cheered again, rolling up his sleeves. "All right," he said. "This round, I order you to—" Xie Lian hurriedly cut in. "Stop," he said. "Last round, we did the request and stripped. This round should be questions." Shi Qingshuan laughed heartily and said, "Ask questions? That's fine too. Then my first question, Crimson Rain, Swordflower, to you, is, what's the worst suffering in the world?" Hua Cheng's smile faded away, and a brief silence settled in the Temple of Wind and Water. Shi Qingshuan added, "Don't misunderstand. I don't mean anything by it. I'm just really curious. To make it as a ghost king like Crimson Rain Swordflower, is there really anything left in this world that can make you suffer? Maybe nothing of the sort exists. What do you think? Hua Chang asked back. Shi Qingshan pondered and guessed. The city of Gu at Mount Tonglu. There were indeed many who'd come up with that answer when they pondered this question. However, Hua Chang only smiled faintly and said, "That's nothing to fear." Shi Qingshan was amazed. "That's not it?" he asked. "Then what is it?" Hua Chang's lips curled, but that curve soon disappeared. "I'll tell you what it is," he said softly. "To watch with your own eyes your beloved be trampled and ridiculed, yet be unable to do anything. That's the worst suffering in the world." Hearing this, Shelian's breathing stopped, and his body froze. In that rundown temple of wind and water, not a single soul spoke. Shi Qingshan couldn't find anything to say, and only squeezed out, after some time, "Oh." Ming Yi's face still remained cold as he poked at the fire. "Continue," he said. Shi Qingshan scratched his head and waved his hand. "I'm done," he said. "Ming Xiong, you ask something." Thus, Ming Yi looked up slightly, staring at Shelian. "Your Highness," he said. Shelian snapped out of it. He asked. Ming Yi asked, "What's the biggest regret of your life?" Ming Yi was usually quiet, unspeaking, but the moment he opened his mouth, it was unexpectedly a question of such weight. Shelian was stunned for a moment. Was it his disregard of advice and warnings and his selfish descent to the lesser realm? Was it his hubris in thinking himself powerful enough to create rain for Yang An? Was it his wishful thinking that he could save Shenle? Or was it his reluctance in killing certain people? He knew it was none of that. It was a moment before Shelian answered, "My second ascension." The other three in the temple all looked at him, unspeaking. Shelian spaced out for a moment, and it was a while before he snapped out of it and asked, "What is it?" "Everyone, I've answered the question." Hua Chang said quietly, "It's nothing. Let's continue." The third round, Shi Qingshan rolled a 2, Ming Yi also a 2, Hua Chang rolled a 6, and Shelian rolled a 1. Seeing this, Shelian let out a big, big sigh of relief. By heaven, officials' blessings, they'd finally won. It was finally Shi Qingshan's team's turn to be punished, but he was eager and thrilled, as if he was afraid of nothing. "Come at me," he said. "Hit me with your best shot." Shelian smiled. "Then I will," he said. "Lord Earthmaster, you first." He turned to Ming Yi and said, "My lord, please answer the questions I'm about to ask properly, and please don't lie." Ming Yi didn't say anything, and Shi Qingshan waved his hand. "Don't worry," he said. "Ming Xiong is someone who doesn't even know how to lie." Shelian grinned. "Very well," he said. "First question, who am I?" Shi Qingshan was taken aback. "Your Highness, what kind of question is that?" he said. "Aren't you you? Who else can you be?" Hearing this, Ming Yi slowly raised his head and looked Shelian in the eyes. He answered, "The Crown Prince of the Kingdom of Shenle, Shelian." Shelian nodded, then asked, "The second question, who's the one sitting next to me?" After a pause, Ming Yi answered, "The Lord of Ghost City, Crimson Rain, Swordflower." Shelian then asked again, "Then the last question, who's the one sitting next to you?" Shi Qingshan was becoming more and more confused. "Your Highness," he said, "what are you two playing at? Who am I? I'm the Windmaster." "Lord Earthmaster, please answer," Shillian pressed. This time, Ming-Yi didn't answer as fast. After having run into venerables of empty words many times, Shillian discovered a fascinating trait that they possessed. It was this: whenever venerables of empty words spoke, out of 3 sentences, at least one would be a lie. This unique trait was akin to how a normal human being, no matter how healthy or strong, would need to drink water in the span of 3 days, otherwise they'd die from dehydration. This could not be changed, no matter how powerful one was. The distance-shortening array was drawn by Ming-Yi. The last one out the door was also Ming-Yi. If anyone had meddled, he had the most chances. Therefore, of course Shillian would suspect him. However, at the time, Shi Qingshuan was obviously distraught. So if Shillian voiced his suspicion, it would no doubt only make Shi Qingshuan even more distressed, allowing for the Reverend of Empty Words to suck more negative emotions from him, fueling its own power. Thus, at that time, Shillian immediately looked for other options. But in reality, he had never given up on the most straightforward possibility. Generally speaking, the Windmaster and the Earthmaster shared a very good relationship, and it'd be impossible for the Windmaster not to notice if the Reverend of Empty Words was pretending to be the Earthmaster. However, what if the Reverend of Empty Words really did surreptitiously possess Ming-Yi? Thus, at the beginning, he wanted Huachang to work with him to trap Ming-Yi's words. Huachang, however, suggested that since they never really conversed, if he should be the one to trap Ming-Yi's words, it'd be unnatural. Why not use the pretense of a game and create opportunities? Let Ming-Yi himself speak, then see if they could observe and find anything without the Windmaster and Earthmaster noticing. Yet, Ming-Yi had always been a man of few words, and even in a fervent atmosphere, each of his words were precious like gold. Earlier in the game, Shillian paid close attention to everything Ming-Yi said, but it was all ambiguous, nothing that could determine truth or falsehood. In the end, he had to use the killing hand. He borrowed Huachang's skill, secretly controlling the roll of dice to make Ming-Yi intentionally lose. Then, with the 3 sudden questions, Ming-Yi would have no choice but to answer on the spot. Because it was all a game, Shi Qingshuan hadn't yet realized anything and thought that they were still joking around, and thus that Reverend of Empty Words couldn't take the chance to sneak in and suck out power. However, should Ming-Yi answer wrong, he'd show himself, and Shillian would seize him immediately. A creature like the Venerable of Empty Words would lie within 3 sentences. Now, Shillian had asked 2 questions, and Ming-Yi answered both correctly, which meant if Ming-Yi was the Reverend of Empty Words, he would no doubt answer the last question with a lie.